Okay, so this is chapter 13 of the Tribulation Force. It's a second book in the Left Behind series, and I will begin to read chapter 13. Stanton Bailey gripped his armrest of his big chair and rocked back, studying Buck Williams. Cameron, he said, I have never been able to figure you. What was the sack lunch business all about? It was just a cookie. I was hungry. I'm always hungry, Bailey roared, but I don't eat on TV. I wasn't sure I could be seen. Well, now you know. And if Carpathia and Plank still let you at the signing table in Jerusalem, no sack lunches. It was a cookie. No cookies either. After years as Hattie Durham's captain, Rayford now felt like his subordinate still sitting across from her impressive desk. Apparently, his coming straight to the point had sobered her. Rayford, listen, she said. I still like you in spite of how you dumped me, all right? I would never do anything to hurt you. Trying to get a complaint about me into my personal file is not going to hurt me. That was just a joke. You saw right through it. It brought me a lot of grief, and the note waiting for me in Dallas about the new Air Force One being a 777, same thing I told you, a joke. Not funny, too coincidental. Well, Rayford, if you can't take a little teasing, then fine, I won't bother. I just thought, friend to friend, a little fun wouldn't hurt. Come on, Hattie, you think I'm buying this? This is not your style. You don't pull practical jokes on your friends. It's just not you. Okay, I'm sorry. That's not good enough. Well, excuse me, but I don't answer to you anymore. Somehow, Hattie Durham had the capacity to rattle Rayford more than anyone else did. He took a deep breath and fought for composure. Hattie, I want you to tell me about the flowers and candy. Hattie was the worst bluffer in the world. Flowers and candy, she repeated after a guilty pause. Stop with the games, Rayford said. Just accept that I know it was you and tell me why. I only do what I'm told, Rayford. See, this is beyond me. I should be asking the most powerful man in the world why he sent my daughter someone he has never met. Flowers and candy. Is he pursuing her? And if he is, why doesn't he sign his name? He's not pursuing her, Rayford. He's seeing someone. What does that mean? He has a relationship. Anybody we know? Rayford gave her a disgusted look. Hattie seemed to be fighting a grin. It's safe to say we're an item, but the press doesn't know, so we'd appreciate it. I'll make a deal with you. You quit with the anonymous gifts to Chloe. Tell me what the point was, and I'll keep your little secret. How's that? Hattie leaned forward cons- conspiratorially. Okay, she said. Here's what I think, all right? I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I just do what I'm told, but that's one brilliant mind in there. Rayford didn't doubt that. He just wondered why Nikolai Carpathia was spending time on such trivia. Go on. He really wants you as his pilot. Okay, Rayford said tentatively. You'll do it? Do what? I'm just saying I follow you, though I'm not sure I really do. He wants me as his pilot, and so. But he knows you're happy where you are. Still with you, I think. He wants to provide not just a job that might lure you away, but also something on your end that might push you from where you are. My daughter being pursued by him would push me toward him? No, silly. You weren't supposed to find out who it was. I see. I would be worried that it was someone from Chicago, so I would be inclined to move and take another job. There you go. I got lots of questions, Hattie. Shoot. Why would someone pursuing my daughter make me want to run? She's almost 21. It's time she was pursued. But we did it anonymously. That should have seemed a little dangerous, a little upsetting. It was. Then we did our job. Hattie, did you think I wouldn't put two and two together when you sent Chloe's favorite mints available only at Hallman Meadows in New York? She said. Maybe that wasn't too swift. Okay, let's say it worked. I think my daughter's being stalked or pursued by someone who seems sinister. As close as Carpathia is to the president, doesn't he know they're after me to pilot Air Force One? Rayford, duh. That's the job he wants you to take. Rayford slumped and sighed. Hattie, for the love of all things sacred, just tell me what's going on. I get hints from the White House and PenCon that it's Carpathia who wants me in there. I'm approved sight unseen to fly the UN delegation to Israel. Carpathia wants me as his pilot, but first he wants me to be the captain of Air Force One. Maddeningly, Hattie turned a tolerant and condescending smile on him. Rayford Steele, she said in a schoolmarmish tone, you just don't get it yet, do you? You don't really know who Nikolai Carpathia is. Rayford was stunned for a second. He knew better than she did who Nikolai Carpathia really was. The question was whether she had any inkling. Tell me, he said. Help me understand. Hattie looked behind her as if expecting Carpathia at any moment. Rayford knew no one could sneak up on them in the echoing marble floored edifice. Nikolai is not going to give back the plane. Excuse me? You heard me. It's already been flown to New York. You're going to see it today. It's being painted. Painted? You'll see. Rayford's mind reeled. The plane would have been painted in Seattle before being flown to D.C. Why would it be painted again? How's he going to get away with not returning it? He's going to thank the president for the gift, and he already did that the other day, I heard him. But this time he will make it obvious he's thanking the president for a gift, not for a loan. You get hired by the White House first, and you come with the plane on the president's salary budget. What can the president do? Look betrayed? Say Nikolai is lying. He'll just have to find a way to look as generous as Nikolai makes him out to be. Is that brilliant? It's boorish. It's thievery. Why would I want to work for a man like that? Why would you? Why would you? I'll work with and for Nikolai for as long as he'll let me, Rayford. I have never learned so much in so short a time. This is not thievery at all. Nikolai says the United States is looking for ways to support the UN now, and here is a way. You know the world is coming together, and someone is going to lead the new one world. Getting this plane in one way to show that President Fitzhugh defers to Secretary General Carpathia. Hattie sounded like a parrot. Carpathia had taught her well, if not to understand, at least to believe. Okay, Rayford summarized. Carpathia somehow gets pan-con and the White House to put me at the top of the list of pilots for Air Force One. He has you agitate me at home, so I want to move. I take the job, he gets the plane, and never gives it back. I'm the pilot, but I'm paid by the U.S. government. And this all ties in with Carpathia eventually becoming the leader of the world. Hattie rested her chin in her entwined fingers, elbows on the desk. She cocked her head. That wasn't so complicated, was it? I don't get why I'm so important to him. He asked who was the best pilot I ever worked for and why. And I won, Rayford said. You won. Did you tell him we almost had a fling? Did we? Never mind. Of course I didn't tell him that, and neither will you if you want to keep a good job. But you told him I was a Christian. Sure, why not? You tell everyone else I think he's a Christian anyway. Nikolai Carpathia? Of course, at least he lives by Christian principles. He's always concerned for the greater good. That's one of his favorite phrases. Like this airplane deal. He knows the U.S. wants to do this, even if they didn't think of it. They might feel a little put out for a while, but since it is for the greater good of the world, they'll eventually see that and be glad they did it. They'll look like generous heroes, and he's doing that for them. That's Christian, isn't it? Buck was scribbling furiously. He had left his recorder in his bag at the hotel, expecting to get it when he returned from the Global Weekly office to interview Rabbi Mark Feinberg, one of the key proponents of rebuilding the Jewish temple. But when Buck had entered the hotel lobby, he had nearly run into Feinberg, who was pulling a large trunk on wheels. I'm sorry, my friend. I was able to get an earlier flight, and I'm going. Walk with me. Buck had dug his notebook from one pocket and pen from the other. How do you feel about the pronouncements? Buck asked. Let me say this. Today I have become a bit of a politician. Do I believe God is a concept? No. I believe God is a person. Do I believe that all the religions of the world can work together and become one? No, probably not. My God is a jealous God and will share his glory with no other. However, can we tolerate each other? Certainly. But you may ask, why do I say I have become a politician? Because I will compromise for the sake of rebuilding the temple. As long as I do not have to sacrifice my belief in the one true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I will tolerate and cooperate with anyone with a good heart. I do not agree with them or with their methods, many of them. But if they want to get along, I want to get along. Above all, I want the temple rebuilt on its original site. This was virtually done as of today. I predict the temple will be constructed within the year. The rabbi burst through the front doors and asked the doorman to hail him a cab. But, sir, Buck said, if the head of the new one world religion considers himself a Christian, Feinberg waved Buck off. We all know it will be Matthews, and that he will likely be the next pope. 2. Considers himself a Christian. He is a Christian through and through. He believes Jesus was Messiah. I'd soon believe Carpathia is Messiah. You're serious? Believe me, I have considered it. Messiah is to bring justice and lasting peace. Look what Carpathia has done in just weeks. Does he fit all the criteria? We'll find out Monday. Are you aware that my colleague Rabbi Tyson Ben Judah is? Yes, I'll be watching. There were plenty of other sources Buck could talk to about Carpathia, and he wanted to speak with Ben Judah personally. What he wanted from Feinberg was the temple story. He redirected the subject. What is so important about the rebuilding of the temple? Rabbi Feinberg stepped and spun, watching the line of cabs, obviously worried about the time. But though he did not maintain eye contact with Buck, he continued to expound. He gave Buck the short course as if teaching a class of Gentiles interested in Jewish history. King David wanted to build a temple for the Lord, he said, but God felt David had shed too much blood as a man of war, so he let David's son Solomon build it. It was magnificent. Jerusalem was the city where God would place his name and where his people would come to worship. The glory of God appeared in the temple, and it became a symbol of the hand of God protecting the nation. The people felt so secure that even when they turned from God, they believed Jerusalem was impregnable, as long as the temple stood. A cab pulled up, and the doorman loaded the large trunk. Pay the man and ride with me, Feinberg said. Buck had to smile as he pulled the bill from his pocket and pressed it into the doorman's hand. Even if he had to pay for the cab ride, it would be a cheap interview. Kennedy, Feinberg told the driver. Excuse me while I use my phone, Buck said. Rabbi, let me see your bill so I get the number of the hotel. He called the concierge and told her he would need his bag stored longer than he had expected. She asked him to hold and came back on. Sir, someone took that bag for you. Someone what? Took that bag for you. Said he was your friend and would see that you got it. Buck was stunned. You let my bag be taken by a stranger who claimed to be a friend of mine? Sir, it's not as bleak as all that. I think the man could easily be located if necessary. He's on the news every night. Mr. Carpathia? Yes, sir. One of his people, a Mr. Plank, promised he would deliver it to you. Feinberg seemed pleased when Buck finally got off the phone. Back to the temple, he shouted, and the driver pulled his foot off the gas. Not you, Feinberg said. Us. Buck wondered what a man with such unbound energy and enthusiasm might do in another profession. You'd have been a killer racquetball player, he said. I am a killer racquetball player, Feinberg said. I'm an A minus. What are you? Retired. And so young. Too busy. Never too busy for physical exercise, the rabbi said, smacking himself on his flat, hard stomach. Ah, the temple, he said. The cab was soon stuck in traffic, and Buck kept scribbling. When Hattie excused herself to answer the phone on her desk, Rayford slipped his New Testament and Psalms from his pocket. He had been memorizing verses from the Psalms, and as his anxiety over meeting Carpathia grew, he turned to those favorites and ran them over in his mind. He found Psalm 91 and read verses he had underlined. He who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him I will trust. 1,000 may fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. No evil shall befall you, nor shall any plague come near your dwelling. For He shall give His angels charge over you, to keep you in all your ways." When he looked up, Hattie was off the phone and looking at him expectantly. "Sorry," he said, closing the Bible. "That's all right," she said. "The Secretary General is ready for you." When the cabbie's assurance that the rabbi was not going to miss his plane, Feinberg warmed to his subject. The temple and the city of Jerusalem were destroyed by King Nebuchadnezzar. 70 years later, a decree was given to rebuild the city and eventually the temple. The new temple, under the direction of Zerubbabel and Joshua the high priest, was so inferior to the temple of Solomon that some of the elders wept when they saw the foundation. Still, that temple served Israel until it was desecrated by Antiochus, Epiphanes, and Greco-Roman ruler, about 40 BC. Herod the Great had the temple destroyed piece by piece and rebuilt. That became known as Herod's Temple, and you know what became of that. I'm sorry, I don't. You're a religion writer and you don't know what happened to Herod's Temple? I'm actually a pinch hitter for the religion writer on this story. A pinch hitter? Buck smiled. You're an A-minus racquetball player and you don't know what a pinch hitter is? It's not a racquetball term. I know that, Rabbi Feinberg said. And other than football, which you call soccer, I don't care about other sports. Let me tell you what happened to Herod's temple. Titus, a Roman general, laid siege to Jerusalem. And even though he gave orders that the temple not be destroyed, the Jews did not trust him. They burned it rather than allow it to fall into pagan hands. Today, the Temple Mount, the site of the old Jewish temple, is occupied and houses the Muslim mosque called the Dome of the Rock. Buck was curious. How were the Muslims persuaded to move the Dome of the Rock? That proves the magnificence of Carpathia, Feinberg said. Who but Messiah could ask devout Muslims to move the shrine that in their religion is second in importance only to Mecca, the birthplace of Muhammad? But you see, the Temple Mount, the Dome of the Rock, is built right over Mount Moriah, where we believe Abraham expressed his willingness to God to sacrifice his son Isaac. Of course, we do not believe Muhammad to be divine. So as long as a Muslim mosque occupies the Temple Mount, we believe our holy place is being defiled. So this is a great day for Israel, a great day since the birth of our nation. We have collected millions from around the world for the rebuilding of the temple. Work has begun. Many prefabricated walls are finished and will be shipped in. I will live to see the reconstruction of the temple, and it will be even more spectacular than in the days of Solomon. At last we meet, Nikolai Carpathia said, rising and coming around his desk to shake hands with Rayford Steele. Thank you, Miss Durham. We will sit right here. Hattie left and shut the door. Nikolai pointed to a chair and sat down across from Rayford. And so our little circle is connected. Rayford felt strangely calm. He was being prayed for, and his mind was full of the promises from the Psalms. Sir, it is interesting to me how small the world is. Perhaps that is why I believe so strongly that we are becoming truly a global community. Would you believe I met you through an Israeli botanist named Chaim Rosenzweig? I know the name, of course, but we have never met. Indeed, you have not, but you will. If not while you are here, then Saturday on the plane to Israel. He introduced me to a young journalist who had written about him. That journalist met your flight attendant, Miss Durham, while on your plane, and eventually introduced her to me. She is now my assistant, and she introduced you to me, a small world. Earl Halliday had said the same thing when he'd heard that Hattie Durham, a former PanCon employee, was working for the man who wanted Rayford as pilot of Air Force One. Rayford did not respond to Carpathia. He didn't believe they had met coincidentally. It was not such a small world. It was possible all had been where God had wanted them to be, so Rayford could be sitting where he was today. This wasn't something he wanted or had sought, but he was finally open to it. So, you want to be the pilot of Air Force One? No, sir, that was not my desire. I am willing to fly her to Jerusalem with your delegation at the request of the White House, and then decide about the request to become the pilot. You did not seek the position? No, sir. But you are willing to give it a try. Mr. Steele, I want to make a prediction. I want to presume that you will see this plane, experience the latest technology, and want never to fly anything less. That may very well be, but not for that reason, Rayford thought, only if it's what God wants. I also want to let you in on a little secret, something that has not been announced yet. Miss Durham has assured me that you are a man who can be trusted, a man of your word, and as of recently, also a religious man. Rayford nodded, unwilling to say anything. Then I will trust you to keep my confidence until this is announced. Air Force One is being lent to the United Nations as a gesture of support by the President of the United States. That's been on the news, sir. Of course, but what has not been announced is that the plane will then be given to us, along with the crew, for our exclusive use. How nice of President Fitzhugh to offer that. How nice indeed, Carpathia said, and how generous. Rayford understood how people could be charmed by Carpathia, but sitting across from him and knowing he was lying made it easier to resist his charm. When do you fly back? Carpathia said. I left it open. I'm at your disposal. I do need to be home before we leave Saturday, however. I like your style, Carpathia said. You are at my disposal. That is nice. You realize, of course, that should you get this job, and you will, that this is not a platform for proselytizing, meaning meaning that the United Nations, which shall become known as global community, and I in particular, are proactively non-sectarian. I am a believer in Christ, Rayford said. I attend church, I read my Bible, I tell people what I believe, but not on the job. If you become my superior and that becomes a directive, I will be obligated to obey. And I will, and it will, and you will, Carpathia said, just so we understand each other clearly. I like you, and I believe we can work together. I don't know you, sir, but I believe I can work with anybody. Where had that come from? Rayford almost smiled. If he could work with the Antichrist, who couldn't he work with? As the cab pulled up to the curb at Kennedy International, Rabbi Mark Feinberg said, I'm sure you won't mind including my trip in your total, as you did interview me. Certainly, Buck said. Global Weekly is more than happy to provide you a trip to the airport, provided we don't have to fly you to Israel. Now that you mention it, the rabbi said with a twinkle, but he did not finish the thought. He merely waved, retrieved his valise from the cabbie, and hurried into the terminal. Nikolai Carpathia pressed the intercom button. Miss Durham, have you arranged for a car to the hangar? Yes, sir, rear entrance. We are ready. I'll buzz you when security arrives. Thank you. Nikolai turned to Rayford. I want you to see the plane. Certainly, Rayford said, though he would rather have started toward home. Why on earth had he said he was at Carpathia's disposal? Back to the hotel, sir? No, Buck said. The UN building, please. He dug in his pocket for his cell phone and called Steve Plank at the UN. What's the idea of absconding with my bag? Just trying to do you a favor, old buddy. You at the plaza? I'll bring it to you. That's where I'm staying, but let me come to you. That's what you intended anyway, wasn't it? Yep, be there in an hour. Carpathia may not be here. I'm not coming to see him. I'm coming to see you. When Hattie buzzed, Carpathia stood at his door opened. Two security guards flanked Nikolai and Rayford as they made their way through the corridors to a freight elevator, down to the first floor below ground level and into a parking dock where a limousine waited. The driver leaped out to open the door for Carpathia. Rayford was walked around to the other side where his door was open. Rayford found it strange that though he had been offered no refreshment at the office, Carpathia now insisted on showing him everything available in the limo, from whiskey to wine to beer and soft drinks. Rayford accepted a Coke. Are you not a drinker? Not anymore. Used to be. Never a hard drinker, but occasionally unwise. I haven't touched a drop since I lost my family. I was sorry to hear of that. Thank you, but I have come to terms with it. I miss them terribly. Of course, but I have peace about it. Your religion believes that Jesus Christ has taken his own to heaven. Is that it? That's it. I will not pretend that I share that belief, but I respect any comfort the thought may bring you. Rayford wanted to argue, but he wondered at the advisability of doing what Bruce Barnes would call witnessing to the Antichrist. I am not a drinker either, Carpathia said, sipping seltzer water. So why didn't you let me come to you? Steve Plank said. I would have. I need a favor. We can trade favors, Buck. Say yes to Carpathia's offer, and you'll never have to ask for anything again as long as you live. To tell you the truth, Steve, I have too many good stories in the hopper right now to even think about jumping. Write them for us. No, no can do, but help me if you can. I want to get in to see those two guys at the Wailing Wall. Nikolai hates those two, thinks they're crazy. Obviously they are. Then he shouldn't have a problem with me trying to interview them. I'll see what I can do. He's with a pilot candidate today. Oh, you don't say. Carpathia and Rayford stepped from the limo outside a huge hangar at Kennedy. Carpathia said to the driver, Tell Frederick we would like the usual drama. When the hangar door opened, the plane was illuminated with brilliant spotlights. On the side facing Rayford were the words Air Force One and the seal of the President of the United States. As they walked around to the other side, however, Rayford saw the team of painters high on scaffolding. The seal and the name had been illuminated. In its place was the old logo of the United Nations, but with the words Global Community in place of the current name. And in place of the name of the aircraft, painters were putting the finishing touches on Global Community 1. How long until both sides are finished? Carpathia called out to a foreman. It'll be dry on both sides by midday, came the answer. This side took about 6 hours. Other side will go quicker. Airworthy by Saturday easily. Carpathia flashed a thumbs up sign, and the workers in the hangar applauded. We would like to board, Carpathia whispered, and within minutes a lift had been jury-rigged that allowed them to enter from the rear of the sparkling new plane. Rayford had toured countless new aircraft and was usually impressed, but he had never seen anything like this. Every detail was richly appointed, expensive, functional, and beautiful. In the rear were full bathrooms with showers. Then came the press area, large enough for parties. Every seat had its own satellite phone, Bluetooth, and a TV. A restaurant was midship, fully stocked, and with room to move and breathe. Closer to the front came the presidential living quarters and conference room. One room contained high-tech security and surveillance equipment, backup communications, and technology allowing the plane to communicate with anyone, anywhere in the world. Directly behind the cockpit was the crew living quarters, including a private apartment for the pilot. You will not want to stay on the plane when we land somewhere for a few days, Nikolai said, but you would be hard-pressed to find better accommodations anywhere. Buck was in Steve's office when Hattie Durham dropped in to inform Steve that Nikolai was out for a while. Oh, Mr. Williams, she said, I can't thank you enough for introducing me to Mr. Carpathia. Buck didn't know what to say. He didn't want to tell her she was welcome. In truth, he felt awful about it. He just nodded. You know who was in today, she said. He knew, but he didn't let on. Who? Buck realized he would have to stay on his toes with her and with Steve, and especially with Carpathia. They must not know how close he was to Rayford, and if he could keep from them any knowledge of his developing relationship with Chloe, so much the better. Rayford Steele, he was the pilot the day I met you on the plane. Oh, I remember, he said. Did you know he was up for pilot of Air Force One? That would be quite an honor, wouldn't it? He deserves it. He's the best pilot I ever worked for. Buck felt awkward talking about his new friend and brother in Christ as if he barely knew him. What makes a good pilot? Buck asked. A smooth takeoff and landing, lots of communication with the passengers, and treating the crew like peers rather than slaves. Impressive, Buck said. You want to see the plane? Steve said. May I? It's in an auxiliary hangar at Kennedy. I was just out there. Want to go back? Buck shrugged. Someone else has already been assigned the story of the new plane and pilot and all that. But sure, I'd love to see it. You can still fly on it to Israel. No, I can't, Buck said. My boss was crystal clear on that point. When Rayford arrived home that evening, he knew Chloe would be able to tell he was pensive. Bruce canceled the meeting for tonight, she said. Good, Rayford said. I'm exhausted. So tell me about Carpathia. Rayford tried. What was there to say? The man was friendly, charming, smooth, and except for the lying, might have might have made even Rayford wonder if they had misjudged him. But there's no longer any doubt about his identity, is there? He concluded. Not in my mind, Chloe said, but I haven't met him. Knowing you, he wouldn't fool you for a second. I hope so, she said, but Buck admits he's amazing. Have you heard from Buck? He's supposed to call at midnight his time. Do I need to stand up to make sure you're awake? Or do I need to stay up to make sure you're awake? Hardly. He doesn't even know we ate our cookies at the same time. I wouldn't miss telling him that for anything. And that's the end of chapter 13. Next, we'll be reading chapter 14. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful day, and you're free to go.